This is the World Organic News, the week ending 8th of October 2018. Jon Moore reporting. Decarbonise the air and recarbonise the soil. This week I'm on the road, so I'm running episode 1 from Permaculture Plus for your listening pleasure. By the time you hear this, episode 2 should be in the feed. I'd urge you all to listen and subscribe. Thanks again, and I'll be back next week.
Hello and welcome to Permaculture Plus, a brand new podcast. I'm co-founder and host Rich Bowden.
And I'm Jon Moore, also co-founder and host of the show. Yes, this is episode 1 of a monthly series, bringing you new and old thinking to everyday situations and lives. A new way of looking at finding solutions, an ecological approach perhaps, that draws on the best of the old and the exciting new.
Yeah, fantastic, John. Look, we're basing the show around permaculture, its principles and ethos, but we're definitely not limiting ourselves to that, are we?
Hence the plus.
Exactly, and we'll be introducing concepts old and new into the podcast in addition to the solid basis that is permaculture thinking. As Fiona Rossiter, owner of Bissy's Permaculture Cafe in Orange, New South Wales, and a long-time permaculturalist told me, people think that permaculture is restricted to gardening or farming, but it's not. It's far more than that.
Okay, as this is the introduction to Permaculture Plus, can you tell us, Rich, just what the spark was for this creation? The thought process that led up to its creation and the dreaded familiar phrase, "John, I have a new idea."
Yeah, thanks, pal. I'm ignoring that, by the way. The answer is that it wasn't just one thing that kicked off this chain of events. It was many, and they were one after the other. Now, I wrote a blog post called New Ways of Thinking over at Permaculture Plus in the blog section about this process. And it was this thinking, based on but not limited to permaculture principles, that I wanted to put firmly at the centre of Permaculture Plus.
And here's Rich reading the blog post for our collective listening pleasure.
Sometimes things just fall in a line. They come together beautifully. This was the case for me, as the ideas for establishing Permaculture Plus took shape. An interview here, a book bought in error there, a few conversations and pointers to a YouTube video or 3. You know how these things escalate, and I was away. There wasn't a single aha moment, as Mark Spencer, my friend and co-host of sustainability podcast Climactic, would say. It was more a series of realisations, thought trips and ideas that triggered a deeper response. The unearthing of some concepts that, to use a cliché, had been bubbling away in the deepest, darkest recesses of my brain for years, if not decades. So why not use permaculture as a way of systems thinking? I knew that I wanted my new podcast to be a bit different and encompass new ways of thinking for listeners. So no pressure, eh? But the more things came together, the more I realised it wasn't just I who wanted to break free from traditional modes of thinking and learn new ways of expression. It wasn't just me who sought new clarity on everything from diet to organic gardening to systems thinking to finding solutions within the everyday problems we face, to introducing meditation into one's life, to thinking of ways to tackle climate change, to name but a few. It didn't take much convincing to get my great friend Jon Moore on board, for Jon has been the key person I've turned to for interpretation of issues for decades. Though our discussions have ranged, or should I say raged, from opposing viewpoints, we've always come together in an understanding of mutual respect for each other's intelligence. So who better to start a podcast designed to demystify and make relevant new ways of thinking based on permaculture thinking and principles? The second inspiration, which seemed to come out of nowhere, was the book 7 Ways to Think Differently by permaculturalist, poet and author Luby McNamara. For now I'll say this slim volume, bought in error, crystallised my thinking on where I want to take the Permaculture Plus podcast. It spoke to me as some books do. Exactly the right reading at the right time. I'll be going into much more depth on this book's wisdom in coming blog posts and podcasts, so please watch this space. Thirdly, I'm grateful to permaculturalist and cafe owner Fiona Rossiter for putting the idea of a permaculture network including podcasts, back into the forefront of my brain. This in a fascinating interview I conducted with her at the back of her wonderful Permaculture Cafe Bissies in Orange, New South Wales. Now, the interview was for Climactic, and the ideas espoused by Fiona brought back the learning and thinking I had done on the discipline. So why permaculture? A number of years ago I completed a permaculture design certificate, originally taken as a curiosity, as I had always had an interest in organic gardening, and it instilled in me the absolute value of common sense. Indeed, when I tried to explain the course to my parents, who had been brought up during World War II rationing, which continued well after the war in the UK, they were unimpressed, saying this common sense approach was what they did to survive. Everybody then grew a wide range of vegetables to fill in the gap in supply as wartime privations grew, and the sense of community, with everybody relying on each other for survival, was strength in itself. Permaculture principles were working right there. This discussion with my parents was an important moment for me. Nothing is new under the sun. All new methods of thinking have their origins in that of our ancestors, of societies ancient and relatively modern, of all cultures. We should not only be careful to respect and learn this wisdom, but raise awareness of this phenomenon, the cyclical nature of systems thinking. Therefore, everything we provide on the podcast and website should be both relevant to regular people and exhibit that common sense pointed out by my mum and dad. Thanks, Mum. Thanks, Dad. One of my goals is to distill this wisdom, whether for a big issue or small, through the podcast, to generate a sense of excitement, of interest, even a shift in thinking, as I have experienced recently. Most importantly, though, I'd like this to be a podcast for you, the listener. John and I value your feedback and spreading the word as we seek to create something special, something that resonates, something that is based around common sense and relevance is greatly appreciated. Thank you.
So as I see it, it's two things. A show about applying permaculture thinking to everyday problems, be they health, diet, introducing meditation practice to everyday lives, to finding solutions in our daily lives based around natural ideas and thoughts. And secondly, introducing new thinking outside permaculture thought and ideas, but based on the old-fashioned common sense approach.
Exactly, John, and you always say it better than me too. And we've been using the term permaculture quite a bit so far in the first episode, and as that and a common sense approach will underpin the show, I wonder if you could explain the concept to the listeners, please, John.
Okay, so permaculture is based around three very simple ideas, or ethical foundations. Earth care, people care, and fair share. And they pretty much mean what you'd think they'd mean.
Yep.
Of course, if there's no earth care, the rest really doesn't matter. People care and fair share are also interconnected, but fair share includes all of life. It's the ecological application of these two ideas. There's a blog post over at the Permaculture Plus website where I go into these in more detail, and from these ideas, these ethical foundations, follows the 12 principles of permaculture.
And here's John reading from his blog post.
The 12 Principles of Permaculture, an introduction by Jon Moore. From the three ethical underpinnings discussed in earlier posts comes their implementation, the 12 principles. I will be discussing these over the next 12 weeks in more detail. Today, though, I'll be introducing them so you and I can contemplate them prior to our deeper dives. Any thoughts or suggestions or clarifications you think need to be made would be greatly appreciated. To the principles. 1. Observe and interact. This sums up, for me, the key practice of permaculture. Observing how the various parts of an ecosystem interact allows us a deeper understanding of that ecosystem. We can then interact with it with sensitivity. 2. Catch and store energy. All life on Earth originates in the atomic reactions in the sun. All energy is, therefore, solar in origin. We can store energy within an ecosystem as kinetic energy, that is, something moving, potential energy, something still that could move, or as chemical energy in a battery. By storing energy, we have a backup for times of dearth. 3. Obtain a yield. This is sort of the point. A beautifully balanced ecosystem that doesn't feed us is of no use to us. By designing a system of yields, food, energy, fibre, we allow the system to maintain itself and yet support us as well. 4. Apply self-regulation and accept feedback. Any excessive removal of a resource has consequences long beyond the lifetime of those exploiting it. Think of the oil industry, industrial agriculture, and so on. Equally, vast tracts of land are uninhabitable because of the salt in the Fertile Crescent. These may be traced back to the first farmers. 5. Use and value renewable resources and services. Maintain beehives and they will multiply. Focus on monoculture and the bees will be affected. Trees will supply yields of fruit, timber, firewood for generations if cared for properly. 6. Produce no waste. Waste is but a resource in the wrong place, to quote Bill Mollison. Equally, we can dye clothes without the use of toxic chemicals like chlorine. Thinking beyond the moment allows us to avoid wastes. 7. Design from patterns to details. The world is a series of fractals. These patterns are obvious when seen from above. Details become part of the overall pattern by conscious design. Integrate rather than segregate. Plan to be available for others. Work together to create opportunities for cooperation and community building, for this too is part of the design process. Use small and slow solutions. Think about the loss of micro-adapted rice species when entire agro-ecosystems were turned over to Green Revolution hybrid crops. Small movements make changes somewhat easier to see, but there will always be unintended consequences. Use and value diversity. Number 10. Not just culturally or politically, but in species selection. More than one type of apple, more than just apples, more than just palm fruit, and so on. Hybrid vigour and multiple redundancies within the system allow for yields in poor seasons. 11. Use edges and value the marginal. Where two systems meet is potential for wonder. Water and land, crops and livestock. The edges of overlap allow for vigour and unexpected outcomes. 12. Creatively use and respond to change. Change is coming. Change is always coming. Creatively designing for this means it is less of a shock. Knowing it's coming means we can respond creatively, especially to the unforeseen events. There you have the 12 principles. None of them climactic zone dependent. All of them a good element in the design process. Next week, I'll dive more deeply into number 1, observe and interact. Thanks for listening to episode number 1 of Permaculture Plus. We'll be back next month with the first of our interview-based shows.
And we'll be looking at news articles, podcast episodes and blog posts that have caught our eye during the month. We'll have more about this in our first full episode next month.
Okay, thanks to everyone for listening, and don't forget to subscribe in your favourite podcatcher so you never miss an episode.
Okay, see you next month.
Bye.